So in this lesson, we're going to talk about comparing fractions. You may hear this word comparing a lot throughout the year, comparing integers, comparing decimals, comparing fractions, comparing ratios, and on and on and on. And when we talk about comparing, I need you to remember that we're using comparing symbols. So this is less than, because if you read from left to right, you're reading from this side right here, and this is pointing to the less number. Then right here we have the greater than sign. Again, if you read from left to right, okay, this is open wider, so this is greater than, and then you have the equal to sign. Now there are actually other compare signs that we'll get to later on in the school year, but these are the three that we are going to continue to use right now. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So how do you compare decimals? There are 3 steps. So step 1 is you're going to take the decimals, the 2 decimals in the problem, and you're going to line them up, almost like you're going to get ready to add them. So you're going to line them up on top of each other by lining up their decimal points. So here I've taken 8.903 and 8.89, and I've put them on top of each other. And then you're going to see that I've added zeros, and it's in red here as a placeholder, only if necessary. Okay. Step 2 is I'm going to start from the left, and this is the left, this is the right, and I'm going to compare the digits, and I'm going to show you how that's done. So I'm going to start from the left. I have an 8 here and an 8 here. Those are the same, so that's not helpful. Then I have a 9 here and an 8 here. So I have one that's bigger than the other. The 9 is larger. Here's the 9, so that must be greater than, and I can stop the problem right there and move on. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice that. So I'm going to just take this decimal right here and put it right underneath this guy, 2.41. There's no need for me to add any placeholders because they line up perfectly. So I'm going to start from the left-hand side. I have a 2 and a 2. So that's not helpful. I have a decimal and a decimal. I have a 4 and a 4, so that's not helpful. And then I have a 7 and I have a 1. The 7 is bigger, okay, so I'm going to make sure that the sign that I put in, this greater than sign, the wide open area is pointing to the bigger number. All right, so here I have 1.8 and 1.75. So this time I'm actually going to drag the 1.8 over here and write it under here because I know I'm going to have to add a 0 as a placeholder and I don't want to squeeze it in. But if you want, you can write it over here too. So 1.8, and I'm going to add a 0 as a placeholder right there because I don't want any weird empty spaces. So again, I'm going to start on the left and I'm going to compare the digits. So I have a 1 and a 1. Those are the same. Then I have a 7 and I have an 8. So the 7 is less, so I'm going to make sure that the little arrow is pointing towards the lesser number, okay? And the wide open part is pointing towards the greater number. And this sign right here, remember, is called the greater than sign, okay? Because we read from left to right and it's wide open over here, so it's greater, okay? All right, so 0.13 and 0.11, I'm going to drag this guy over here, 0.11, and I'm going to go ahead and compare. 0 and 0 are the same, 1 and 1 are the same, then I have 3 and 1. The 3 is bigger, so I'm going to put a greater than sign there. And remember, this is a greater than sign because we read from left to right, and this is greater over here. This is less. There's greater space right here. There's less space right there. Okay, 0.98 and 1.2. I'm going to drag this guy over and line him up right here. The key is making sure that the decimal points are lined up. That's very important. Now I'm going to have to add a 0 as a placeholder right here because I don't want any empty spaces. So immediately, right off the bat, I see that I have a 0 and a 1. My 0 is smaller. You may be thinking, why is she circling smaller numbers, bigger numbers sometimes? It doesn't really matter, and I should have clarified that. I apologize. I'm just circling something so it brings it to my own attention. You can circle the bigger one, the smaller one. It doesn't matter. But I'm circling something, so I need to know, hey, I need to stop, and this is where I can solve the problem. So this 0 is smaller, so I need the arrow to be pointing to this smaller number. So this sign right here is the less than sign, because again, we read from left to right, okay, from this way to this way, and this is the less, and this is greater, so we call it less than. Okay, 1.91 and 1.9, I'm going to drag this guy over here, 1.9, add a 0 as a placeholder, and I'm going to compare the digits, 1 and 1, 9 and 9, 1 and 0, all right? The 1 is greater than the 0, so I'm going to put a greater than sign. And again, this is called a greater than sign because we read from left to right, and this is greater space that's open here. All right, 3.4 and 4. Now I'm going to drag this over. Now some of you may be thinking, where do I put the 4? Do I put it over here or do I put it over here? Well, think about it this way. If I have just the plain old number 4, if I were to put a decimal point there and still keep it as a 4, would I put it there or would I put it there? And the correct answer is this one right here. Okay, so as I drag him over, I'm going to put it just like this right there. Okay. So 3 and 4, immediately I see a difference. The 3 is smaller, so I'm going to put a less than sign. And again, it's less than because we read from left to right, and this is less as I start from the left. All right, go ahead and try these guys on your own. Make sure that you line them up if you need to. If you don't need to line them up, then you don't have to worry about that. All right, go ahead and hit pause. If you are not done, and if you are done, let's go ahead and go over it. So all of the answers for this were actually less than, and I did not mean to do that, except for the last one, which was equal to. And real quickly, I'm going to line them up for you. So 4.17 and 4.74. So these guys cancel, and then right here the 7 is bigger than the 1, so we want to make sure that it has the wide open space attached to it. Over here we have 3.1 and 3.9. The 3's are the same, but the 9 is much larger, so we have the greater than sign with it, or it's a less than sign, but the greater than part is with it. All right, here we have 3.456. 3.678. Okay, so the 3's are the same, but immediately we have here a 4 that's smaller, a 6 that's bigger. So the 4 is here, the 6 is here, so the 4 is smaller, so we have a less than sign. Over here we have a 5.96 and a 5.967. Okay, now we have to add a 0 as a placeholder right there, very important, because we have 5's that cancel, 9's that cancel, 6's that cancel, and it's that 0 that becomes very important, the 0 and the 7. And the 0 is less than the 7, so we have a less than sign pointing to that one. And then when we line these guys up here, we need to add a 0 as a placeholder, and they are perfectly equal. Alrighty. Now, as we are comparing decimals, we need to remember that we also need to compare some negative decimals. And just like when we compare negative numbers, it's sort of like the opposite. So the bigger negative number is really the smaller number. So let's do some practice with that. We're going to line them up the same way. Okay, so over here, we're going to have negative 8.4, and then we have negative 8.47. Okay, so our 8's can't, oops, and you know what? I forgot my 0 as a placeholder. I'm sorry. My 8's cancel, my 4's cancel, and then here I have a 0 and a 7. All right, but you need to think about it this way. it's like a negative 0, even though 0 is not negative, but it's like a 0 and a negative 7, okay? So which one is bigger and which one is smaller? And so the appropriate sign here is going to be greater than. So think about it this way. When you get down to these last two numbers, take this as 0 and negative 7. Okay, so which one is bigger, which one's smaller? If you had 0 and negative 7, what's the sign that you would put there? You would put a greater than sign there, and so that's the sign that you're going to put right there. Okay, let's try it with this one here, negative 0.3 and negative 0.28. I'm going to put a 0 as a placeholder here. So our zeros cross out, and then here we have a 3 and a 2. So again, think about it this way. You have a negative 3 and you have a negative 2. So if you were to compare them just as regular integers, what's the sign that you would put there? You would put a less than sign because negative 3 is farther away from 0, and so that's the appropriate sign that you would put there. Okay, let's try this one here, negative 5.81 and then negative 0.581, and we need to add a 0 as a placeholder. So right off the bat we have a difference right here. All right, we have a negative 5 and we have a 0, because remember 0 can't really be negative. So if you had a negative 5 and you had a 0, what would be your sign? And it would be the less than sign, which is the correct sign right there. Okay. Let's see here. Yep, let's do a couple more examples. So let's do negative 4.07, and again I'm lining them up, and negative 4.70. Okay, so my 4's cross out, and then right here I have a 0 and a 7. So again I have a 0 and a negative 7. So if I was comparing them, 0, negative 7, what would be my sign? Well, 0 is greater than negative 7, so that's my sign. Okay, let's do negative 5.1 and negative 5.09. I need a 0 as a placeholder here. Cross out the 5's, and then here I have a 1 and a 0. That's where my difference is. Okay, so here I have a negative 1 and a 0. So if I was to compare negative 1 and 0, what would be my sign? It would be the less than sign, and so that is the appropriate sign right there. All right, here I have negative 3.456 and negative 3.458. Okay, so the 3's cancel out, the 4's cancel out, the 5's cancel out, and we're left with a 6 and an 8. So if I have a negative 6 and a negative 8, and I were to compare them just on their own, what would be the sign? Well, the negative 6 is actually bigger than the negative 8, and so that is the sign that's going to belong in there. All right, you go ahead and try these here. All right, it was a good thing that I worked them all out because I overlooked the last one. So over here, we have a less than sign, then we have a greater than sign, we have a greater than sign, we have a less than sign, and then the last one even tricked me and it threw me off because I looked at it a little bit too quickly and didn't see where the decimal point was placed, but it is a less than sign as well. All right, so I know this seems like a very long lesson, but we have one more thing to cover, and that is repeating decimals, which we will talk a little bit about during our decimal unit. They'll pop up once or twice, but they are important to know. They're not terribly difficult, but again, we will encounter them. So repeating decimals repeat the same number forever, on and on and on and on and on. So think about times where you've divided something in a calculator before, and you've gotten this decimal that went on forever. So sometimes your answer might have been a mumbo jumbo of random numbers. That is not a repeating decimal. So if you put something in the calculator and it came back with 8.7321490 blah 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 blah, that is not a repeating decimal. Okay? What a repeating decimal is this guy, this is the key right here. It repeats the same number or numbers forever. Okay? So repeating decimals have a bar over the numbers that repeat. So when you see something like this right here, 0.2 with a bar over that 2, what that means is that decimal really is 0.222222, and that 2 goes on forever. It infinitely continues. Now this one right here, 1.45 with a bar, a repeating bar over the 4 and the 5, means that the 4 and the 5 repeat forever. So it's 1.4545454545, and it never stops. It repeats forever and forever. Okay? So given that, let's try comparing decimals with that repeat. And the easiest way to do that is again to line them up, but to repeat them out once or twice. So here I did 0.5151. Now it does end up repeating a lot more than that, but that's going to give me a good indication as to where to go from there. And these are both positive. So our zeros match, our fives match, and then here's where our difference is. So we have a 1 and a 2. If I compared 1 and 2, 1 is less than 2, so this is going to be less than. Okay, now be careful right here. Notice that the bar is only over the 4 here, but the bar is over both of the 3's over here. So the way to write this one out is 1.3444, and you can write as many 4's as you think you need. And then this one right here is 1.3333, and again, you can write out as many 3's as you think that you need. So our 1's match, our 3's match, and then this right here is where we have our differences. So I have a 4 and a 3, and if I compared 4 and 3, 4 would be greater, and so it's a greater than sign. All right, now we're going to get a little bit more difficult. Again, notice what the bar is covering though. Here it's covering a 0 and a 2, and here it's just covering a 2. So I have 17.89, and it's going to go 0, 2, and I'm going to take it out twice. Okay? With the next one, we have 17.89, 2, and then a 2 that repeats, and I'm just going to take it out that long. Okay? So cancel, 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 but right here is where I have my difference. I have a 0 and a 2, and if I were to compare them, the 0 is less than the 2. Okay? You go ahead and try these. Make sure you realize what the bar is actually covering. Sometimes it's covering one number, and sometimes it's covering 2. All right, so you should have greater than, less than, and greater than. And what I did is I went out and I showed my work, and then I made a smaller comparison over here. So go ahead and pause the video if you got one wrong, and go ahead and see where you went wrong. All right, that is the end of comparing decimals. It was a lot of different situations, but it'll definitely help you going forward.